Hey everybody, welcome to Raising Vibrations, and in today's video we're going to be doing a subscriber chart reading from one of our Patreon members. And as always, you've been following this series, you've probably been learning a lot about how you read an astrology chart from an evolutionary point of view. And one of my main sort of, I would say, inspirations around doing this is to encourage you to see an astrology chart from this point of view. In other words, to take an astrology chart and say, hold on, there's depth here that is the human condition. And when we access this, we can really get intimately connected with our own personal stories in our lives and begin a process of alignment and begin to heal this sense of displaced emotion that we have and unconscious material that we carry, and where we have had experiences in prior lifetimes that have essentially provided us with empowerment and disempowerment, right? To really get connected with our story. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is just say thank you so much for the patron that wanted to use their chart, and let's see what we can do for you today, okay? So as we start off always, we look at Pluto in the chart, and we can see here that Pluto is in the 7th house of the astrology chart. I don't actually have the numbers on this chart, but Pluto's in the 7th. And we can see that the nature of Pluto is all about how am I learning how to be in relationships, okay? When Pluto's in the 7th, there's this deep unconscious drive to learn that when I'm in a relationship, I'm learning about balance and equality and fairness. And so you'll be very sensitive to what is that in a relationship. How does your needs get met? How do you meet the other person's needs? How are you learning about the way in which give and take operate in a way where where the two people are listening to each other? And another thing that's a part of the story is that Pluto in the 7th house doesn't always necessarily mean that it's about a relationship with another person. It can be just simply a relationship towards animals. It can be towards your work, as an example. In a sense, it is the dynamic of relationships. And at the very deepest level, you're kind of like alchemically transforming the way that you relate. And this is the core sort of essence of your story. This is about coming into the lifetime and saying, I'm here and I'm showing up and I want to explore and understand myself in relation to another person. Okay, that's the core of Pluto in the 7th house. Now, part of having a Pluto story in a house placement is that we're going to be learning about what is abuse, right? What does abuse look like, emotional abuse through relationships? And wherever we have Pluto in our chart, whenever we have Pluto in our chart, we're always going to be learning about what does abuse look like. And we might be part of that abuse. We might be one of the people that is abusing power. Either way, we're learning how power and control and the essence of feeling empowered, let's just use that word, the feeling of empowered is present in yourself, okay, and with other people. So you're learning about abuse, and with relationships, it can be where your boundaries have been violated at a very intense level, where you've experienced certain things happen to you, and that violation of your personal boundaries has been a part of maybe in prior lifetimes. And you can see here that the outer planet of Uranus in Libra in the 7th house adds a lot to that story, which we'll get into. So let's have a look at the nodal axis, right? Or before I jump into that, I want to talk about the nature of Pluto in Virgo. So you're a Pluto in Virgo soul, and you're learning all about the ways in which we have, as a human race, wanted to be of service in relationships, okay? So what I mean by service, it's a very sort of simple word to use when it comes to explaining Virgo, but we talk about sacrifice. So there's a lot of sacrifice in relationships that's played out with the Pluto in the 7th house here. And it might be that you've experienced certain relationships where you felt the need to be of service to other people, and then through that awoken to feelings of disempowerment around other people's criticism, other people's sense of imperfection that they've projected onto you that you've internalized. These are types of dynamics that can play out with a seventh house Pluto symbolism here. And so when we look at the nodes of the moon, we can actually see that the south node sits in the sixth house and it's in Leo, and the north node sits in the 12th house in Aquarius. So the nodal axis in Leo and Aquarius tells me that you've been working on and you've been experiencing and part of lifetimes where recognition has been a very big part of your life, where you've been seen, where you've been recognized for some talents or some gifts. And then there's the other side of the spectrum in which that hasn't been the case. And so there is the element of cycling between what is validation for myself and how do other people validate themselves. And you're also learning about and experiencing the different ways that people are wanting to be seen. And so another way in which this can show up for yourself is deep service to children. Because you see that the south node is actually in the sixth house of the astrology chart. So the nodal axis has a lot to do with how am I, three things come to mind. First one, how am I learning how to see myself and heal some of the ways in which I've tried to create attention, okay? That's the sixth house and the Leo archetype synthesized together. And then you have another way in which that can be explored karmically through children. The Leo archetype has a lot to do with children because children are innocent. Children are here to validate themselves. They really can only validate themselves, right? That's the difference between going from your childhood to your adulthood. You're learning how to become more conscious of the environment around you. And so interacting in a conscious way would be what it means to be an adult, because we're still children, you know, we're still kids in our body. Emotionally, we've got different developmental stages. So you're learning how to understand the context of your sense of self through the different ways that a sense of self can be seen. So children is one of them. You know, working with children would be a past life type of dynamic. Being in a community, again, North Node and Aquarius, in a community in which you've been almost a teacher on some level. Now, why do I talk about that? If you have a look, the sun is actually conjunct Neptune in the 9th house of the astrology chart in Sagittarius, right? And Sag with Mercury is all about communication. It's all about how do we communicate? And Sagittarius is communicate my truth, communicate deeper knowledge, communicate deeper wisdom. And so the soul with the archetype of Mercury and the Sun and Neptune making a square to Aquarius and to Leo says, part of my journey has been around understanding my core philosophy. Part of my journey has been about really trying to get in touch spiritually with the purpose of my existence, right? And why do I talk about purpose? I talk about it because it has a lot to do with the South Node. Remember, whenever you're looking at an astrology chart and you see planets that are squaring the nodes, you can always know that there is something of the past in the North Node and something of that North Node in the South Node, because these are transpersonal. They're existing over time. That is not just about this life. So there's been definitely, in a sense, and almost a sense of crisis in which what has your faith been? And part of that has been through becoming a teacher and teaching certain people in a community that has been of deep service as you relate to people. And then you've also witnessed experiences in your own personal journey in which maybe your sense of relatability and your truth has been linked with sudden endings. Uranus in the 11th house, Uranus in the 7th house, sudden endings, right? And so that has created a deep kind of shock within inside of yourself that said, do I believe in this? Is this my faith? You know, and how that gets connected with teaching is you could be teaching a certain amount of kids, for instance, and one day you just have an experience that says, this is not for me. And you kind of suddenly end and you've got this whole entire dynamic of how people, Pluto, in the 7th house can feel abandoned by you choosing to follow something that's uniquely your own versus maybe being of service to others in that sense. So it's a very interesting dynamic over here in the chart regarding service of others, service to yourself, or being there for yourself and creating space for yourself, and learning how to follow your own faith and being inspired by that gives you meaning, basically, right? So you could have lost the meaning in the truth that you were teaching, and that loss of faith led you to a need to abandon whatever it was that you were immediately committed to. And you can see here with Scorpio, with Jupiter in Scorpio and Venus in Scorpio, there's a lot of psychological states of feeling abandoning your faith and the value in the faith that now leads to a need to explore something deeper within inside of yourself, basically. Okay? All right, so I really hope that you enjoyed this subscriber chart reading, not only to the Patreon, but to those of you that are watching on YouTube and are learning a lot about how to understand an astrology chart from an EA perspective. I mean, I've literally just done that. There is so much more, you know? So with that being said, have a wonderful week, and I'll see you in the next subscriber chart reading. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.